to Julius. Puts up a three. Yes! And a goal!
Bearcat Blitz. How's everybody doing on this Monday across the Believe Network? I'm your host, Russ Heltman of Cincinnati Bearcats on SI. He's my co-host, Neil Meyer from Rivals Cincinnati site, the front office news.com. A full jam-packed show coming your way across the next 20 minutes or so, touching on the Bearcats and their college basketball crown trip. The team in Las Vegas right now getting ready for their first round action against DePaul on Tuesday afternoon on FS1. We'll preview that to start the show, touch on the latest transfer portal happenings, and get to the midway point of spring football for the Cincinnati Bearcats gridiron outfit. But first, we got to tell you about Bet Online. It's the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for betting on all the madness, with the largest selection of odds on everything from college basketball to MLB, NHL, and MMA. BetOnline continues to be your number one sports betting source. From every Cinderella story to every hat trick, BetOnline has you covered with odds, stats, and more for every game, every play, and every win. BetOnline, the game starts here. Let's take a quick break and get to the full preview against longtime rival DePaul on the hardwood, and then we'll look at the gridiron as well after our latest touch on the transfer portal basketball side of things. This is Bearcat Blitz presented by Bet Online. Neil, Cincinnati taking on DePaul at the MGM Grand Garden Arena on Tuesday afternoon. They have dominated DePaul in the past, and they're expected to dominate them again at 3 p.m. Eastern on FS1. They will play the winner of UCF or Oregon State. The winner of this game will, and UC is one of the three top betting favorites to win the college basketball crown in terms of overall betting odds, and they're a comfortable 9.5-point betting favorite against the Blue Demons on Tuesday. Bart Torvik gives the Bearcats a 77% chance to win this game, Neil, with a projected score of 73-66 as Cincinnati tries to extend their win streak in the series to 6 games and extend their all-time lead in the series to 36-15 all-time. Neil, I don't think we need to spend much time on this game really at all, because if Cincinnati has any issues with the team that DePaul puts out on the floor compared to the fully expected roster of Cincinnati, then there are deeper problems in this program that we don't even know about at this point.
Yeah, absolutely, Russ. And it's a great talking point, because DePaul sounds like it's only going to have 7 scholarship players out there in Las Vegas due to the crown, or for the crown.
Which is like what, Neil? Like half? It's basically half of what your scholarship allotment is. Yeah.
So overall, they're going to be down some key players. They're going to be down Connor Enright, who leads the team in assists and is one of the teams, actually leads the team in minutes. So a key piece not going to be there. You're losing Jacob Meyer as well. So 2 of your top players will not be playing in this tournament for DePaul. But overall, Cincinnati is expected to have a full roster. Overall, it sounds like everybody made the trip to Las Vegas. But overall, Russ, if there is any chance that Cincinnati has a trouble with this depleted DePaul team tomorrow afternoon, there in Las Vegas, there is much more to address this offseason than if they can't handle a DePaul team that only has 7 scholarship available players, and a DePaul team at best that finished middle of the pack, Big East, towards the bottom
of the
Big
pack.
East.
No, bad. 6 and 14 in the Big East, 14 and 19 overall, and that was with a full team.
Yeah. So overall, there should be no reason Cincinnati should go out there and take care of business. Russ, and realistically, if we're getting ahead, there's no reason Cincinnati shouldn't go out there to Las Vegas and win that $300,000 prize due to how many teams in this tournament are actually depleted due to the transfer portal.
Right. And they have a full roster, as all reports indicate. They've had almost 3 weeks now to refresh themselves, Neil, from the grind of the Big 12 conference slate, the grind of back-to-back days in the conference tournament. And you're going up against the DePaul team, which is a bad rebounding outfit. So Cincinnati doesn't have to worry about that weakness on their end. DePaul 219th nationally in rebounding. And they are a bad paint defense as well. 58.8% field goal rate allowed on close twos 88% on dunks, and they're going to be fielding a shorter roster rotation because of those missing scholarship players, Neil, a rotation that didn't have much size as it was. And if JJ Traynor, forward in the transfer portal right now for DePaul, is not active in this tournament for them, then they're going to have, Neil, one player that is 6'7" or taller in the entire rotation. So UC should be able to own the glass. They should be able to, even if they don't shoot well, get enough possessions to comfortably win this game. And then as long as they, Neil, don't let CJ Gunn destroy them on the inside and Isaiah Rivera destroy them on the outside, if they can give enough defensive attention to those two top scorers from DePaul, then they should have no issue with the Blue Demons and win by double digits. I got them taking care of this one, 74-64 in favor of the Bearcats as they move on to the Elite Eight of the College Basketball Crown Tournament and keep their sights set on that $300,000 first place NIL prize with another game on Thursday afternoon. Neil, what is your overall score prediction here as we try to continue our strong assessments of the Bearcats games this season?
Yeah, first off, Russ, while we're talking about this matchup, I think it's important to note that Cincinnati now has had a couple of weeks off, and unlike some of the other teams in this conference, Cincinnati hasn't had any time off since the end of December, right? So overall in this tournament, you're seeing these Big East teams.
Right, they hadn't had a bye week this
They've had time
year
off, and Cincinnati hasn't had any time off since December due to the conference playing 20 games. So it's definitely important to note that they've now had 3 weeks to get fully healthy, fully ready to go out there to Las Vegas. Obviously, there's still some things up in the air on guys like CJ Frederick, Connor Hickman. Don't know the full status on them, but overall, Cincinnati should be fully healthy going into this thing. And Russ, for me, I see Cincinnati winning this game by double figures because there's no reason this should be a close game, right? So I'm going to go with Cincinnati. I'm going to have them scoring over 80 points in this matchup just because of the stuff we talked about, the rebounding efforts, the height. Everything plays to Cincinnati's advantage here. I'm going to go Cincinnati 82, and I'm going to go DePaul 64.
Big win for the Bearcats. I was thinking about putting the Bearcats in the 80s, but just the offensive struggles throughout the whole season and the fact that these two teams are both in the bottom half nationally and overall pace in terms of the overall tempo rankings had me keeping it in the 70s and 60s range, but would not be surprised one bit if the Bearcats made this an 18-point win and got into the 80s. With this matchup, a very, very enticing matchup to start this tournament. So you see if UC can get off on the right foot, start some momentum going, and then play into Thursday, play into Saturday, and maybe play into Sunday for that championship matchup at the end of this week. The College Basketball Crown gets going throughout this week on the Fox family of networks. Take a quick break, and then we will get to, actually, we'll stay right here and get to the transfer portal side of things before we take a quick break ahead of the football discussion. Neil, transfer portal hot and heavy right now. The only big news that happened over the weekend was the fact that we had Jalen Sellers put Cincinnati in his top 4 schools. Obviously, we talked about him. I'm glad we did talk about him to close the show last week, with him being a follow on the follower list of Wes Miller. And obviously he has been contacted by the Bearcats ensuingly because he has them in his top 4 schools along with Georgetown, Illinois, and Providence. Sellers 15.9 points, 2.6 rebounds during the 23-24 season. Dealt with a lot of injury this past season. I believe only played in 3 games, due to injury. And still, though, Neil is a career 37% three-point shooter from deep, 37.3% three-point shooter from deep, 3.6 attempts per game, 4.6 free throw attempts per game in 2023-24. That's obviously a portion of the game that we're hoping to see some more growth out of Jizzle James this season that never really formulated. Maybe Jalen Sellers can help show him the way to get to the basket and get to the line in that sense. 6'4", 205 pounds. This is a physical, strong, dynamic guard that, when healthy, Neil, can be a really impactful player.
Yeah, absolutely, Russ. And it's a great thing you mentioned that because Jalen Sellers, too, is a guy who has lit Cincinnati up in the past. And quite frankly, before the injury this season, he was slated to be UCF's top player. 6'4" guard, and he has lit them up in the past. He averaged 16 points per game for UCF in 2023 and 2024. So overall, anytime you can add a guy with Big 12 experience, especially a guy like Jalen Sellers, who has proven to score on all 3 levels, could be huge. But to see him put Cincinnati in his top 4, that is huge news, especially with how transfer portal kind of news is shaken out. But there's been a lot of other interest too, Russ. I mean, you look at some of the tweets, Cam Kraft has also been receiving some interest from Cincinnati, the former Xavier
sharpshooter from Miami.
Yep, former Xavier Musketeer, and then transferred to Miami of Ohio. There's been a couple of different offers out there for Wes Miller and the team over the weekend that they are in contact with as of late. But overall, most of them have been point guards, if you look at it, Russ. And that kind of is one of the key positions that they are looking at there in the transfer portal. So overall, this could be a big-time addition for Cincinnati. It's going to be interesting to see kind of how this all plays out, especially with Jalen Sellers coming off the injuries that he had this season. But overall, it's an interesting name to keep an eye on for sure.
Speaking of big men, one other name of note that we will touch on here before getting to football, and then we'll get to the latest transfer portal kind of further steps. Obviously, there's been a decent amount of contact so far, but you want to really hone in on those guys once they start cutting those lists down to the top four like Jalen Sellers just did. Adam Borst over the weekend reported that Robert Morris forward Amarion Dickerson, with 2 years of eligibility left, has heard from the Bearcats. He posted 13.3 points, 5.9 rebounds on 53.1% shooting this past season. Also interest from NC State, Ole Miss, and Missouri, among others. 6'7", holds 2 years of eligibility, as I mentioned. Is 185 pounds, can really just affect the game defensively. 2.3 blocks per game last season, Neil, for Amarion Dickerson. And then another name of note, Brian Moore Jr. This was just recently on Sunday. Just a high volume scorer from Norfolk State, another guard here, 6'3", 18.1 points per game for Brian Moore Jr., 6'2", 185 pounds, doubled his scoring output from his 23 season at Murray State to 18 points in his 24-25 season at Norfolk State, and looks like a player that is on Cincinnati's radar on an efficient 54.5% shooting last season, Neil, and 39.4% from deep. Dickerson, though, that's the one that's really intriguing, Neil. That's a guy that, 6'7", yes, just 185 pounds, but has that bounce, has that shot blocking defensive ability that Cincinnati could definitely use more of in the front court, or flashing between the front and back court moving forward in 25-26.
Yeah, absolutely, Russ, too. And it's worth noting, too, like if you were to land Amarion Dickerson and you get him into the Monster Factory, is what people around Cincinnati call it. But overall, that could be huge. If you can find himself, if he were to come to Cincinnati and get him around that 200-pound range compared to the 185, could be interesting because everybody knows the Big 12 is different compared to the Horizon League, right? There's going to be a lot more physicality. There's going to be a lot more toughness. But overall, you look at the schools that have contacted him, 3 of the top schools in there are Big 12 schools: Arizona State, Cincinnati. He's got a visit slated for Kansas State, Louisville, Missouri, NC State, Ole Miss, Oklahoma. So there's some good schools in there that have reached out to Amarion Dickerson. So it's going to be interesting, but that's definitely a name to keep an eye on, especially with the size and the physicality and the numbers he was able to produce at Robert Morris this past season.
Taking a quick break here on Bearcat Blitz, flipping to the football side of things as spring football starts to work its way towards and past the midway point of the sessions. Neil Meyer, I'm Russ Eltman. We'll be right back on Bearcat Blitz, presented by Bet Online. Neil, I think 7 practices down, 7 or 8 practices out of the 15 total for the Cincinnati Bearcats football team this spring period in the books. Had Brendan Sorsby talk to the media on Saturday, met with new wide receiver Jeff Caldwell on Friday. Fun time hearing from Jeff for the first time this entire time he's been a Bearcat. First time we've actually talked to Jeff Caldwell, coming over as the transfer from Lindenwood. We'll start there, Neil. Caldwell, I think it's pretty easy, Neil, to see how he slipped through the cracks, seeing as he grew about 7 inches his senior year of high school and didn't really start playing football until the later portions of his high school career. Bang, bang, boom. A few years later, he's transferring from Lindenwood to Cincinnati to be closer to his family, and that geographical location, Neil, could end up being a major godsend for the Cincinnati Bearcats and their offensive prospects this fall, should he do some of the things I expect him to do, given what we've seen evidence-wise in the practice field so far.
Yeah, absolutely, Russ. And it's a great thing you mentioned too. He said he had like a huge growth spurt his senior year where he grew like 8 inches. And then on top of it, Russ, this was a guy who declared for the military at one point in his career as well too.
Right.
And then things changed obviously, and here he is tearing up the gridiron. So overall, he's going to be an impact player for Cincinnati. He's been so fun to watch throughout spring ball, Russ, because man, he not only does he have a great personality off the field. I mean, if you watch the interviews, you can tell he's going to be a great personality for this team. But man, it gives Cincinnati a big time target to go across the middle. And people weren't really kind of seeing that on his tape last year. And when you see it right now, you're like, okay, that's a big time target that can open up the middle of the field, can open up a lot of things for Cincinnati. But he's going to be a freak athlete for Cincinnati. He's going to be a great player. And it was kind of cool to hear him kind of open up about how Brendan Sorsby really kind of sealed the deal for him to kind of come here, as he played a huge role in the recruiting aspect. He said Brendan Sorsby kind of quote unquote slid into his DMs. So overall, that kind of sealed everything. And Brendan Sorsby played a huge role in getting him here. So you have to give credit where credit is due.
Right. And Neil, we talked about the middle of the field last week, how that was a little bit of a problem issue. And it was at times for the passing game in 2024. But what was the biggest problem, and I think a reason why the middle of the field wasn't as accessible maybe as anticipated, was the deep ball. Deep passing, not as sharp as you'd maybe like to see it be. 5 touchdowns, 2 interceptions on 20-plus yard targets last season for Brendan Sorsby. Completed just, Neil, 28.9% of those 38 attempts, 11 of 38 on the year, 5 touchdowns to 2 interceptions, and had an 88 overall NFL passer rating compared to 97.2 in the middle of the field and 99.2 in the short yardage area, 0 to 9 and 10 to 19 yards. So if they can hit some more of those deep shots, Neil, some more of those explosive passes to a guy like Jeff Caldwell, who I said looked like an NFL comp of T. Higgins last week, and that's who he said he emulates in his game when he talked to the media on Friday. If he can bring together some of those explosive plays like T. Higgins has brought to the Bengals and boost this 59.3 PFF passing grade for Brendan Sorsby closer to where his medium and short passing grades are at 79.9 and 79.3, then Neil, all you need is a little bit more production from the special teams, and bing, bang, boom. I'm going to use that phrase once again. You're going to go bowling this fall. You will go bowling this fall if those 3 factors end up coming together on top of all the returning production on defense and how that portion of the team is already expected to be the strongest outfit of the 3.
Yeah, and it's worth noting too, Russ, you mentioned the special teams aspect, and that was an area that lacked for Cincinnati last year. But Steven Rusnak has been just as money as anybody else can really talk about it. I mean, he has looked great through spring ball so far, and he's got a leg. He has a leg. Like, I've seen him hit 50, 55 yarders, and this could be a guy who's come in and shows big-time confidence for Cincinnati, and he walks around with confidence. So overall, when you have a kicker who is confident going out there and hitting 50 constantly like he has shown throughout spring ball, that could add a whole new element, especially in close games like Cincinnati was in last year. Because, Russ, you and I talk about it all the time last year. If they were able to have that kicker that could make that 50-yard field goal in the situation like it was in at Texas Tech, things might have looked a lot differently for Cincinnati last year. But overall, anytime you have that confidence flowing at that special teams position, that's also an added wrinkle into what special things Cincinnati can do.
Right. He was one of, I think, 2 kickers to have 10-plus field goal tries last season.
Year.
Yeah, to have 10-plus tries and go perfect. So hard to do much better than that. Hard to do much better than perfect. You can't do much better than 11 for 11. You just got to get more opportunity, which, you know what, hopefully for the Bearcats offense, he doesn't even have to kick 11 field goals all season. They're just punching those puppies in to the end zone in terms of those red zone trips. Neil, overall, closing out the show in this sense, any overall big takeaways for you in your past few practice trips? Obviously, we had Brendan Sorsby talk to the media on Saturday and just touched on the biggest thing he wanted to improve on throughout this offseason was turnovers. I believe 5 of his 7 interceptions came in the final 5 to 6 weeks of the season, almost averaging a turnover per game after Neil the first 5-6 weeks of the season. During the first 5-6 weeks of the season, not really turning the ball over at all, trying to do a lot more of the first half of the season, taking care of the ball practices, and not the second half of the season.
Yeah, and it's worth noting too, Russ, that he solidified that he came back for a reason, right? I mean, we've always heard him. He came out right after the TCU game and said, "Hey, I'm returning next year. This is where I want to be." And he has shown the true confidence in that, and that has been huge. But the biggest takeaway for me, Russ, is not only Brendan Sorsby now having an upgraded wide receiver room, but man, was the run game hitting on Friday or on Saturday? Man, I saw Evan Pryor break one loose. Tawi Walker broke one loose and broke a couple of tackles in the process. Offensive line starting to gel, and it's hard to replace 3 guys who are going to the NFL. And that has been something we have talked about. But, man, the Bearcats were running the rock on Saturday, Russ, and that was a great sight to see, especially with how big the holes were opening up front from the offensive line. And if that continues for Cincinnati, it's going to be a great season because obviously, in the years past, Cincinnati has been able to break the home run ball, but they haven't been able to get all the way to the end zone. And both times on Saturday, when that thing opened up and parted like the Red Sea, Tawi Walker and Evan Pryor were able to find the end zone.
Got the 7th practice ready to roll to start this week, continuing our jaunt through spring football for Cincinnati Bearcats. Outfit for Neil Meyer. I'm Russ Heltman. This has been Bearcat Blitz presented by Bet Online. Enjoy your week, everybody.
This is the second. 15 seconds left. Shot clock off. 4-point game. DeJulius puts up a 3.